Did you know there was a significant difference in types of wood cutting boards? Yeah, well, there is. And today, we're gonna talk about it. Welcome back, folks. If this is your first time here, I'm Alex Labby, and right now, like here in just a sec, I'm gonna show you what an end grain cutting board is, what an edge grain cutting board is, and the pros and cons of both of them. Now let's get started. If you cook a lot, or even a little, you may find yourself using one of these. Or even one of these. So this here is an edge grain cutting board. And right hither lies an end grain cutting board. For me to properly illustrate what the hell that means, we're gonna have to go back to the roots of the tree. Well, not that far back, but come with me. This is a slab of wood. This slab of wood was cut from a tree. Now, if I were to take a saw and rip the edge like so, this would be the edge grain of the board. We've got your face grain, your edge grain, and this here on the end, that would be your end grain. I'm gonna use a smaller board just for demonstrating purposes. I use that slab so you are able to understand how it comes from the tree, then becomes a board. And now, to achieve our edge grain cutting board, we would take a rough cut board, we would take it through a milling process where we flatten it on a joiner, flatten one side on a joiner, then we would run it through a machine called a planer to provide us with a uniform thickness. It also uses the bottom as reference with a cutter head on top, essentially matching that uniform flatness up top. Then back again to the joiner. From there we have 3 milled sides, and then we could take her to the table saw. At the table saw, we would cut a series of strips and then flip them up with the edge side up. This then goes to the clamps and is glued together. After the glue dries, we then bring the glue up back to the planer to remove enough material to obtain a smooth surface. Now, if we wanted to accomplish an edge grain cutting board, we would simply square off the ends, sand all sides, and then of course you would oil it and wax it. However, if we wanted to make an end grain cutting board, we would take this glue up and cross cut it again into strips, flip those up with the end grain up, and bring those to the clamps for glue up. Now, because of the grain orientation, it is not ideal to send these end grain cutting boards through a planer. We could become a victim of tear out. This will simply result in us, well, wasting our time, okay? So after the second glue up, we would send them through a sander. Oh yeah, a big old sander, better known as a wide belt or a drum sander. Now we could finish sand all sides, oil it, and wax it. Hey, real quick, if you have any questions or want to tell me which one you like better, just drop a comment down below. And you could even subscribe if you feel like it. Let's get back. Now that we have a better understanding of what these two types of cutting boards are and how they're made, let's cover the pros and cons between the two to help you figure out which one is best for you. The edge grain cutting board is a good one. It's hard to beat that look of wood strips properly adhered together, whether it's all the same species of wood or a mix of species. It's a nice piece to keep on your counter to show off to your guests or to even yourself every time you use it. Another pro of the edge grain is they might run a little cheaper than their end grain cousins because it doesn't have that extra step when building them. Now, the end grain cutting board, in my opinion, is the best, hands down. They're absolutely beautiful. It's almost as if the end grain is trying to tell you a story. You see all kinds of crazy shapes and patterns on an end grain cutting board. It is the ultimate show-off piece. It's also the most resilient. Because of the nature of the wood fibers and the way they are oriented, the end grain cutting board is going to hold up the best. The end grain cutting board is the most resilient against, well, cutting. When you cut on an end grain cutting board, you're cutting with the wood fibers. Cutting with the wood grain welcomes the knife slightly into the grain. This is going to be the best on the blade of your knife. Think of it like chopping wood. Have you ever tried to chop wood on the edge of a log? Cutting on the edge, that ain't the way the wood wants to be cut. But when you split the wood on the end grain, it is much more forgiving. This makes things easier on your knife and your cutting board, as it essentially accepts the knife blade slightly into the grain. Now don't let this confuse you with the end grain cutting board splitting easily with the stroke of a knife. Unless you're going to be swinging them all at these bad boys, you ain't going to be splitting these end grain cutting boards with a kitchen knife. Another pro is the end grain cutting board, when properly finished, also wicks bacteria due to the nature of the wood, much like the way it welcomes the slice of a knife. So let's cover some cons on the edge grain. I think we covered one con with the wood splitting analogy. The edge grain isn't going to be so nice on your knife, and vice versa. Over time, the knife is going to start to make its way through the wood fibers and you'll start to see some wear. In return, wearing out your knife's edge. Because of this reason, your edge grain cutting board may not last as long. Some cons on the end grain. Because of the second step in the build and the machine you need for sanding and the time it takes to finish sand, the end grain probably going to cost a little more than the edge grain. Another potential negative, if not properly cared for, is wood movement. Wood is constantly expanding and contracting. So depending on how the cutting board is cleaned, dried, and re-oiled, you could dry it out so much that the wood could crack. This also could invite unwanted bacteria into the cracks and may deem your cutting board not so sanitary. Though with proper care and a standard reapplication of food grade mineral oil and or beeswax, you shouldn't have any problems. This is where I leave the decision up to you. Only you know what you want and only you know what you need. But please feel free to head over to labbystradeandco.com to see all our cutting board options if you want to support what I got going on. And if you don't see what you're looking for, I recommend that you support someone local and at the very least, a handmade shop in your country, if possible, of course. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch this video. If you think I missed something or have any questions, just drop a comment down below. I really do appreciate it. If you like this video and want to see more, subscribe. That'd be cool too. I'm also on Facebook and the Gram, all under Labby's Trading Co. I mean, man, would you look at that? Oh, man, look at these. Ooh, he got more of these.